In the shadows of New York City's migrant crisis, startling figures emerge. Approximately 100,000 individuals have ventured into the city's borders within the last year, arriving at one of the most economically challenging junctures imaginable. According to Mayor Adams, this has given rise to what can only be described as the most severe humanitarian catastrophe in the city's history. But believe me, that's only the tip of the iceberg. Issues like homelessness, criminal activities, and lawful employment are teetering on the brink of disaster. In this expose, we will delve deep into the ominous future that the New York migrant crisis forebodes. It may not be immediately apparent, but the state of affairs in New York has reached a dire state. Mayor Adams has already declared a state of emergency, passionately urging the entire nation to follow suit since President Biden took office and rescinded Trump's policies. Over 7.5 million people across the United States borders, all yearning to chase their American dream. New York, in particular, has borne witness to over 100,000 immigrants knocking on its doorstep in the past 12 months. The city's resources have been stretched to their limits, struggling to accommodate these new additions to its societal fabric. Essential services like housing, food security, and healthcare have become stumbling blocks, overwhelmed by the sheer volume of needs that have arisen. As the humanitarian crisis unfolds right before our very eyes, it continues to breed new challenges for both the present and the future. With this influx of people, the city's legal system is grappling with insurmountable demands, leaving us to wonder if there's any way out of this escalating crisis. The problem is that the police can't keep up with all the issues, and one of the problems is crime. New York is known for being a safe city, but that might not be entirely true. New York has a lot of people in a small space, so while the chances of one person out of 8 million being involved in a violent crime are low, the chances of someone being near a violent crime are still quite high. This can make it seem like the city is less safe than it really is. There aren't enough police officers to handle everything, especially in areas like the Bronx, East Harlem, and the subways where poverty is high or the population is dense. As a result, many crimes go unreported. In these areas, there have been more assaults and petty thefts in recent years. The crime rate in the subway also went up suddenly in the first half of 2023. Although it had gone down by 4.4%, it then shot up by 18% in June. Additionally, there have been over 3,000 incidents involving knives recorded in the city since the beginning of the year. The Bronx is getting more dangerous and is considered the riskiest neighborhood in New York City. Statistics show that about 9.28 violent crimes occur for every 1,000 people in the Bronx, which is higher than in other parts of the city. Interestingly, the Bronx is the most common destination for immigrants after going through the housing system because they can blend in more easily. Not all types of crime have increased in New York in the last year. There are still reasons to be concerned. The rise in crime often happens at the same time as an increase in immigration, and if more people keep coming to the city, it's unlikely that this trend will change. Another troubling aspect of the migrant crisis is the problem of finding a place for these newcomers to live. New York's emergency housing system is already holding more than 60,000 immigrants. The city has even designated 195 sites to house homeless individuals. They opened a new shelter on Randall's Island that was meant for up to 3,000 asylum seekers, but it had to be closed because it was too inconvenient for the immigrants. Randall's Island is far away from essential services, and it's not easily accessible. Many immigrants would rather sleep on the streets in Manhattan. Because so many immigrants have arrived in a short period of time, the city constantly runs out of space to house them. By law, New York City is required to take in immigrants and provide temporary housing for them, but they can't keep up with the demand. They even passed a new law that says immigrants in the city's housing can only stay for 60 days before they need to reapply or find another place to stay to make room for new immigrants. The lines to get into some of the city's shelters can be very long, with families waiting for 2 to 3 days, forcing them to sleep on the streets. Once their 60 days are up, it's unlikely that they'll be able to rent or own a home in the New York area. Housing is one of the most challenging issues caused by the migrant crisis, and the cost of housing keeps going up. There's simply not enough housing for all the new people coming to New York. Even if there were, the newly arrived immigrants couldn't afford it. They might be able to afford it if they could get legal and meaningful jobs, but that's also a problem. It usually takes about 2 to 3 years for the asylum process to grant a work permit to an immigrant after they arrive. Considering they are forced out of temporary shelter every 60 days and the cost of living keeps going up, there's no way they can make it in New York for that long, just sleeping on the streets and waiting to be allowed to work. To make things even more complicated, because there are so many immigrants, the wait for legal work might extend to even more years or possibly never. So the only option left is to find jobs in the underground illegal job market, where people break the rules to survive. Many newly arrived immigrants end up doing food delivery jobs for companies like Uber Eats, Grubhub, and Seamless. However, these jobs require a proper sign in with a valid ID, a bank account, and a social security number, which the immigrants don't have. So they turn to the underground digital identity market. Immigrants often pay to borrow someone else's credentials to sign up for the delivery app, usually for around $100 to $150 a month. This means you have people renting out their valid IDs to immigrants and immigrants using someone else's identity to work. To be able to work, immigrants often resort to something illegal, which is also their only option. It doesn't end there. Once they have the fake ID and sign up, they need a way to move around the city to deliver the food, like a motorcycle or a moped. The need for transportation has led to a market where they can rent almost brand new unregistered mopeds in the New York City area. There are dealers who rent these bikes for around $300 a week. If everything goes well, the immigrants can buy one permanently within 2 months, usually costing about $1,200. These mopeds have to be unregistered because the immigrants can't get driver's licenses as they just arrived. So they drive without proper licenses on public roads, which is against the law. If the vehicles were registered with number plates and caught on red light and street cameras driven by immigrants without licenses, it could lead to the confiscation of the bike and possibly the arrest of the person. As for what the government can do about all this, the city of New York doesn't have much control. The decision to speed up the process for work permits, provide more housing, or even shut down the border lies with the federal government. However, they can increase security and have more officers in the subway to meet the growing security needs. The same applies to the Bronx. The city could allocate more resources to reduce violent crime in that area. But it's important to note that the city is short on resources right now. The worst thing about the New York migrant crisis is that there's a very real chance that things could get even worse. Housing, security, and illegal jobs are already on the rise, and if nothing is done soon, the problems could become much more severe.